Hi, my name is Brent Meadows. I currently work as a solutions architect for a cloud service provider called Expedient. One of my roles is to interact with the customers as they're trying to make the migration from on-site infrastructure to the cloud infrastructure and really guide them how they need to make the transition, or how's the best way to make the transition. So what I want to talk about, well, first a disclaimer. Of course, we've seen this every time on every presentation. But what I want to talk about today is kind of how we get from where you're at today and how you get to the cloud. Three of the things that I look at is to define the success criteria. Kind of why are you moving to the cloud? What needs to happen to get you there? What's going to be a successful migration? Then we need to look at the applications themselves, know the applications you're moving, how they're going to interact, and what it's going to be like for the remote users that are now using them in the cloud. And as all part of this, moving to the cloud is a big part of that is controlling costs, and how are we going to control those costs, and how are we going to ensure a successful transition. Now, the example I'm going to use is an actual customer that we helped go through this. This is an architectural firm. They were hit really hard during the downturn of 2008, so they hadn't put a lot of money into IT over the last few years. As they rebounded around, they got the funding to be able to update their systems, and their CEO, CFO heard about this cloud thing and went to their IT team and said, hey, let's move to the cloud. So that's where they came to us. They had very few needs, so they're basically 4 locations, very simple architecture, WAN between the locations with an internet connection. So probably very similar to some environments that you have today. One thing that was a little bit different about them is they did have a file server in each location. And what they looked at as success criteria was to move everything out of their data center. They were having some power issues in the environment, and then consolidate those and centralize those file servers so they didn't have to do all the management across all of those file servers. So they had pretty easy requirements, not very hard to meet, but when we're looking at doing a complete platform migration, it's not just those technical requirements that we look at. We actually want to look at the user experience as well, because no matter how many projects you put through, if the end users experience any type of behavior that they're not used to, they're not going to like the change. So as we're moving from an on-premises application to a cloud application, we want to make sure the users are either having better experience or at least an equal experience. So if anything's any slower than they normally see, they're not going to like that. If anything's different than they usually see, they're probably not going to like that as well. So once we've defined those criteria, kind of pick out what we want to make this a successful migration, we need to look at the applications themselves. So kind of your standard design philosophies, you first need to discover what you're looking for. So are we looking just for technology changes? Are we looking for application changes? Are we looking to make the user experience better? Once we have all those discovered, we need to look and define the current challenges and shortcomings. So if we look at the current environment, is it a great environment? Is everything working as it should be? Or are there things that could be improved that we can fix as part of this change that'll make the end users' lives easier? And then once we have all those things together, we design the solution, and then we go through the migration and implement it. The one thing to know about the applications is you really need to know how the business utilizes those applications. Is it their main business function to use this application to drive their department forward, or is it something they just use every once in a while and don't have to have a lot of availability, or don't really care how the application works? So with the specific customer we're looking at today, we did that discovery, and some of the things that we found was the reason that they had those file servers in every single location is they had AutoCAD users that were doing all their architectural drawings, and they were saving them locally to the file systems, and then those file servers were uploading each night. So one of the things that they wanted to do, create a better user experience, is to not have to save locally and then sync, to maybe just centralize and consolidate those file servers. So the other thing that we looked at was the network. The reason they had all of those distributed file systems was they all had less than 10 megs of internet connectivity or bandwidth between the sites. So they were having to save locally so that their users were able to move those files and not wait for 5–10 minutes to open files, save files for all the graphics they were doing. So we went through and looked at the success criteria, we defined those, and we know the applications. So now we need to know what the VMs that are running those applications do and how we move those. So one of the examples that I like to use is, imagine you're going out for a date night. So you've finally found a babysitter, you're taking your significant other out, you go to the nice restaurant, but kind of everything's backlogged, so you have to get on the waiting list. Well, when you go and ask to be on that waiting list, you've only got 2 people, you're not going to ask for an 8 or 12 person seat. So that is very similar to how CPU readiness, the CPU scheduling works. So as we go through right sizing of the environments, we want to look at a few things. As you're changing platforms, you may not know the level of oversubscription that the new platform is going to have. So you want to make your environment as efficient as possible so that when you go into that environment, it's going to perform the way that you think it should. So when we look at CPU, we want to make sure that we're not committing too many CPUs or provisioning too many CPUs and causing CPU ready for both you and, especially in a multi-tenant environment, another user. And even if you're going into a private environment where you don't have to worry about the multi-tenancy, you still want to make sure you can get the most usage out of the CPUs available to you as you can. Kind of same thing on the RAM side. In an enterprise environment, most of the time when those software developers or new applications come in and they have the recommended RAM there, you kind of go ahead and give it everything that they ask for. But if you actually go back and look at what the applications are actually using after the fact, they may be only using 5, 10, 50% of that RAM. So if you can go and right size that, you'll get better performance, better consolidation ratios, and in the end, save you money. And the other thing we see is on the storage and storage performance. So a lot of IT managers, as they're going out and looking at cloud options, they know, hey, this application has 1 terabyte of disk space, that's how much I need. What they fail to look at a lot of times is the performance that that storage needs to provide. So if you're going out and doing base cost calculations and say a terabyte of storage is 3 cents on this provider, 5 cents on this provider, you may think, hey, it's all the same storage, I want to go with a 3-cent provider. But what you really need to do is look at the back-end storage and performance that it can provide. So if you're deploying an application that has very low performance needs, then the lower cost may fit the need. But if you're doing a database that doesn't have a lot of use yet, once it actually comes into production and it starts getting hit with a lot of IOPS, a lot of transactions, that lower tier storage may not work and your costs are just going to skyrocket. So really when you're looking at moving those applications, those VMs, we need to really make sure we're right sizing for 2 reasons. One is if we're not sizing appropriately, we're going to over provision and increase our costs. And as we make the move from an on-premises to a cloud architecture, one of those benefits is the scale-out architecture and the cost compression. And if you're buying more environment than you need, you're not realizing that cost savings. And if you don't size it appropriately, you may deploy that application, it may not run appropriately, and then you hurt your end user experience. So again, end users aren't happy. So we've gone through success criteria, we've laid out the things that we need to look at for the applications, we make sure all of the VMs are right-sized, and then we've put that solution together. So to kind of close out this particular customer, what they ended up doing was moving the AutoCAD environment, instead of running it on-site at each remote location now, they moved that to the data center. They're equipped with GPUs so they can access their VDI desktops, they can perform their CAD drawings, get them out to their contractors anytime, anywhere, so they're no longer tied to their desktop in each of the remote offices. So their lives are much easier. They have faster equipment, better performance, and access anywhere. So from a user experience, everything kind of hit the checkbox. We've had that successful criteria that we set forth. And then the file servers are now consolidated, as was one of the original looks into why we were going to do that consolidation. So when you're looking at migrating from a public or an on-site infrastructure to a cloud infrastructure, kind of go through those steps, kind of same design principles that you would whether you're designing a new product, new service. Go through, inventory what you have, discover what any shortcomings are, see if you can fix those shortcomings as part of your solution, put the solution together, and hopefully you make your end users' lives much easier, because really we're here to support those end users, whether it's your internal customers or paying customers out in the environment. And with that, I'll thank you and I'll be around for any questions.